I'd like to welcome all of our listeners to the next episode of Unido Talks. Unido Talks is a podcast where we interview founders and thought leaders about innovative technologies from the business, fintech, and crypto sectors. My name is Joseph Crow, and with me we have the CMO of Unido, Michael Swan, and Alexander Khvatov, the founder of DGT. Welcome to the show, gentlemen. Great to have you both here.
Thanks so much. Thank you. Glad to be here. It's a pleasure.
Alex, to our listeners who are unaware of what DGT is, could you give them a quick overview of what DGT is?
Yeah, of course. So DGT is a layer 1 blockchain network. We are based out of Toronto, Canada, and what we seek to do is a little different from the blockchain networks out there. We seek to bring centralized enterprises into the blockchain world. We have a special HNet architecture, as we call it, which has capabilities of public blockchains that enable companies to build open ecosystems, to tokenize, to use identity management. At the same time, we base our companies in sort of clusters or segments within our network, and that gives them the governance and control that a lot of enterprises are looking for, but are not getting for any of the public chains that they're trying to join. So basically, DGT is trying to combine the best of both worlds, the open ecosystems of public chains and the control of private chains, as well as some additional layer 2 capabilities. And we've been up and running since 2017, working with many different enterprises, primarily in Europe, some here in Canada, some in the US. We have a few exciting projects going on in Australia and Brazil, which are fairly new. But yeah, we're launching our mainnet quite soon, and a lot of exciting things going on, both for the blockchain world and for DGT, and I'm sure for Unido. So yeah, thank you for having me. I'm very excited to have this talk.
That's awesome. Well, it's exciting that you're rolling out in Australia as well, as that's where Michael's at. So that's awesome.
Yes.
So could you give us a quick compare and contrast for distributed acyclic graphs, or DAGs, compared to blockchain? Because I know DGT is a DAG. So to listeners who are unaware of maybe that difference, could you explain that a little bit for us?
Yeah, of course. And there are many ways to classify blockchain. I think DAG-based or not DAG-based is one of the main ones that we get to hear a lot out there. Directed acyclic graphs are not blockchains per se. There are different ways to store information. There are also a form of ledgers that are publicly shared, that are immutable, similar to the way blocks are in traditional blockchains such as Bitcoin. But they're very different, that they can grow in several different directions. They're more of a tree rather than a specific chain, and that gives them a number of separate advantages. One, you can have different segments on the network growing simultaneously, so you don't have to wait for a transaction to finish for all other transactions to happen. And it's especially important for networks like ours, which is more enterprise-focused, and a lot of transactions may be heavier or have more data or need some additional checks and verifications, which can take days or have multiple participants. And we don't want the whole network to slow down, because on the other end we may have microtransactions or gaming platforms which really need to get going. So DAG enables us essentially to split the growth of our ledger into separate segments, make our network asynchronous, and make it very horizontally scalable. So with each additional node that joins our network, we get more processing power, and our network actually speeds up rather than slows down. And I think that will make a big difference for our business customers.
Very cool, very cool. And what started you, or what inspired you to start DGT, and what inspired you to make it a DAG rather than other blockchains?
Yeah, we started in 2017, so it's been a while, but it's not necessarily really early. A lot of people I talk to, they say like, oh, we invested in Bitcoin in 2013 or in Ethereum in 2016. So we were a little late to the game on one front, but on the other, we kind of saw where the blockchain technologies were going, what was already working, what was out there, and we saw a big gap in scalability back then. Ethereum was, of course, it still is a big 70% of the market kind of blockchain, but it was also big at that point. But they had a drastic issue in terms of how scalable they were. The fees were already going up. The speed of the network was already going down, and we tried to tackle that problem. We didn't want to make another smart contract chain. We didn't want to make another Bitcoin. Right from the beginning, we wanted to get into the enterprise space. Our CTO, he has experience in enterprises. He's been in the space for 22 years, not blockchain, but enterprise tech and platforms. So he started thinking in terms of what we can do to make our blockchain different and more scalable. And immediately 3 things came up. One is this HNet architecture, so breaking it down to segments and clusters. Another is our own consensus model, which powers the blockchain and enables us to be scalable and secure, essentially. And of course, the DAG ledger, we really had to do something different than a traditional blockchain if we wanted it to be fast and scalable. That was in 2017, not the best time to launch. We wanted to do an ICO. We were initially specifically designed for mobile gaming companies, but once the ICO was imploded, we kind of had to change gears. So since then, we've innovated, we've addressed more markets, we've really grown as a project. We've faced some ups and downs here and there, but I think our early advantages in DAG, the FBFT consensus, and the HNet architecture really helped us out along the way.
That's awesome. And what has your experience been so far in onboarding corporates into this DAG technology or DGT?
Well, onboarding corporates is difficult. I'm not going to lie about that. It depends on where you go. We've seen that a lot of growth in the blockchain has been from DeFi companies or companies that are already either very advanced in fintech or are very agile in terms of the technologies they adopt. And that's great, but going forward, we see there are three major growth factors for blockchain. The DeFi or decentralized enterprises, I think, is already being saturated as a market group. The next is emergent market participants, so companies in Africa, companies in Latin America. And the biggest growth factor for blockchain is, of course, the centralized enterprises in the US, in Australia, in Canada, in Europe, in traditional Western markets. And what we found is that for many large enterprises, they're doing quite well. I mean, one of the phrases we encounter often is that no one has been fired for getting an IBM project. So IBM, even though their blockchain may be not as superior as ours in some regards, still just because of their brand name, just because it carries less risk for managers, is being adopted more and more. So that was a difficulty for us, maybe 2018, 2019, maybe a bit still. But as the time goes on, we see a lot of enterprises that are actually interested to explore blockchain, not for the hype, not for IBM, but for how it works. There's been a survey done, I think by Deloitte, that 93% of Fortune 500 executives want blockchain projects to take some sort of role in their firm, but only 23% of those same companies have anything up and running. So there's a clear demand there. And as we go along, we definitely had to adapt our messaging, definitely had to focus on the business aspect rather than selling the technology. But I think the enterprise market is set to grow, and it's a big area, so we are very optimistic going forward.
Michael, I know that we've had in-length conversations about how these emerging markets tend to be the ones most willing to accept crypto or blockchain technology and to really use it. Do you see that being maybe the catalyst that really launches a lot of these innovative technologies? Is third world markets?
Look, you innovate out of necessity. You don't innovate with the idea, I'm going to come up with an innovation. You're faced with a problem, and your innovation is solving that problem. I think Alex has already covered the issues with the legacy public blockchains as it relates to the more sophisticated, smart contracts that corporates are going to want, not just transacting value in Bitcoin, it's very straightforward, but executing smart contracts, storing data, and then the shortcomings here. So then you look at the corporates in first world countries versus second and third. There are sophisticated corporates in third world countries, sure, they're not as prevalent. I think specifically with what Alex and team are doing here, it is pretty smack bang in the middle for enterprise. I'm sure there'll be applications in gaming, but you could imagine, gaming's well spoken for by Solana currently, and Polygon. I sort of see this sort of thing smack bang in the middle of enterprise. And he said, I think he said there was a report of Deloitte's saying, the best part of 90% want it and 20-something% have it. So there's a huge market of 70% in the middle where there's appetite. There must be appetite because they've got things to solve. People, executives don't typically come out and say, we want to undertake this without a reason. Everyone's watching the bottom line and costs. There must be a reason that they need these sophisticated products. So the report speaks for itself. The difficulty, and we've seen across the market with enterprise crypto products, crypto or blockchain more widely is a hot topic. And when, especially for a public company, you report to the directors as a CEO, and the directors report to the shareholders, and they go to AGMs and they get shouted at about why you did this, why you did that. So there's a political aspect for every public company about committing to these new technologies, where politicians have things to say about blockchain, and comments that how originally Jamie Dimon was saying crypto was for drug dealers. Those sorts of things, and probably tongue-in-cheek at the time, make it a bit of a hot potato for a company or a large organisation which has a lot of stakeholders to keep happy to take a jump. And I think Alex said right at the start that where you do get traction is tech-savvy and fluid companies, and probably where founder-driven and maybe, for lack of a better term, crypto nuts are the founders who are ready to push the boat out. But you need these guys, right? You need these guys to push it out, and all they need to be is a few unicorns that make it, and critical to making it was blockchain infrastructure, whether it's Alex's or someone else's, and then it brings it into the mainstream. So we've got this paradigm to get past, where it's a political hot potato still when you're a public company and all eyes are on you. I think what solves it is time and people's willingness to be a bit brave and push the boat out. And the efficiencies are there. Everyone on this call knows what it can do and how it can solve problems. It speeds up processing time, and of course the transparency factor. To your question, Joe, transparency in first world countries is typically greater than it is in second and third world countries in corporations. The transparency factor is a demand. Adapting that to corporate structures and sophisticated smart contracts, you can see these things coming together. So it's really exciting what Alex is building. It's the same ethos as where we started with Unido to begin with, that corporates need corporate-grade products. There's a lot of promise in blockchain, but it was an enthusiast exercise to begin with, right? Bitcoin was written for people, for individuals to hold Bitcoin in their pocket. The design would never suggest it was designed for corporates to put Bitcoin on a thumb drive and throw it in some guy's drawing accounts, right? So there needs to be a seismic shift on the products of layer one blockchains, and stuff like what Alex is doing here, it fills a big gap. The real challenge is getting the adoption, is convincing enough people, enough corporates that be brave, take the jump. And I'm convinced it'll happen one way or another, but it's a matter of time. Was that a 15-minute spiel?
No. I like how you put it, Michael, how you said that it's cryptonauts and these entrepreneurs or unicorn companies that come to market and demand that they use blockchain solutions. Are you seeing that, Alex? Are you seeing some of these younger business-minded people wanting to implement it into their companies?
Yeah, I'm seeing it, and I like Michael's term, the political hot potato, because that's something we've really encountered, not just on a large policy level, but even within organizations. Often if we come in, even if it's an upfront-looking company, even if it's a young company, an advanced company, they may have their own blockchain department, and that blockchain department is essentially competing with us. So we talk to the CEO, they like our product, they're like, yeah, we can build something with DGT, why don't you talk to our blockchain guys? And of course, for the blockchain guys, their incentives are built differently because they've been working on something for 18 months and we are essentially a competitor for them. So navigating that political hot potato has been a challenge that we kind of had to adapt to and resolve, and focus more on the, I think, business applications rather than, yes, we are a blockchain, or adapt us because blockchain is moving forward. And Michael was right to point out, Bitcoin was built for the people. I think a lot of that conversation is coming back now that people are talking about Web3. So giving the power back in the hands of the average consumers, giving them the power over data, the content they create, taking it away from such behemoths as Google, Facebook, so forth. But at DGT, the way we see it is a necessary middle step towards the decentralized world is, of course, bringing the incumbent corporations or companies into the blockchain world so they can provide that value, so they can build those ecosystems. I don't think it will be just directly moving towards the P2P world just quite yet. So as a DGT, we are trying to find those innovative companies that could bridge that gap at this moment.
That's very cool. And what are some of the bigger use cases in terms of applications that you see DGT providing the most support to?
There are many use cases out there. I think if you look at DGT or other blockchain companies maybe 2 or 3 years ago, a lot of the conversation has been around supply chain or payments or cross-border settlements. Now the conversation has become much more diverse in terms of the use cases that are out there, and I'm pretty sure Michael will agree. You see similar stuff when you look at Unido and the people you're talking about. For DGT, the most kind of big growth areas that we are seeing that are emerging just now is tokenization, of course. There's been tokenization going on for a long time, ever since ERC20 came out, but it has been much more limited in scope back then. Right now we are seeing NFTs, restricted NFTs, tokenization without smart contracts, which is what we are trying to implement as DGT, because we see smart contracts as being essentially external code to the network, so writing and reading it back and forth creates some performance and security issues. So tokenization is a big one. There's a lot of demand for it in real estate, in commodities, in carbon, which we are trying to address. Another interesting use case, I think, is building data ecosystems among enterprises, so enabling them to share data and analytics on the customers they have without breaking confidentiality laws. I'm not sure how it is like in Australia, and I think Michael can correct me, but it's pretty bad in terms of European legislation and the US legislation if you break any of those privacy or confidentiality laws. They take a percentage of your revenue, up to 4% of global revenue in case of GDPR. It's really not a law you want to break. But at the same time, there's a lot of benefit to be derived if you're a company that has some data which can be enriched by data from another company, and you can achieve much more insight into the consumer. I know one of the projects that Ernst & Young is actually working on abroad is marketing attribution. So they take a telecom company that has data on the GPS location of the phones of its customers. They take banking data for those customers in terms of their spending habits, and they take social media data in terms of what those customers have seen. Now, you cannot combine it legally, or I would personally say ethically, but if you use blockchain and some of its capabilities that are emerging right now, like using zero-knowledge proof protocols or secure multi-party computation, you can essentially group the data in such a way that nobody has access to it, not the people, not the machines, but the analytics are there to be used by companies that can later target the customers much better, that can create those sort of loyalty ecosystems on a much deeper level, that can create exciting projects like recommendations for small businesses, for instance. I used to have a lighting store way back when, in 2010, 2012, and it was a great experience, but a failed one. We had an idea of bringing European lights to Canada because a lot of the selection here was pretty basic as far as we understood. So we opened in a small town where I lived in. It's still called Oakville. It's near Toronto, and we wanted to bring this premium European lighting. What we didn't account for is that there are only, I don't know, maybe 2 or 3% of the population there that would be our customers. So you ran through them pretty fast, and then nobody really wanted to pay that much for something you didn't care about. Using marketing attribution, using these advanced products, we can get data compiled about spending habits, about traffic of customers, and essentially get a recommendation. Like if you open an Oakville, yeah, you'll have 5% of chance of succeeding. But if you open this sort of store with this sort of product in the middle of Toronto or Melbourne or Germany or anywhere else, you can have, 87% chance of succeeding if you do this, this, and that. And really having that empowered data ecosystems is, I think, important for Web3 companies and something to look forward to moving forward without fear of any privacy being sacrificed along the way.
In terms of censorship resistance, is DGT at the base layer censorship resistant? Because I know it's a DAG, so the consensus model is a little bit different than verifying blocks. Could you explain that process to us a bit?
Yes, we use an FBFT consensus. Essentially, it's an adaptation of the BFT family of consensuses, which are quite common, especially now. But we adapted it towards this federative structure that we have, essentially our overall blockchain network being divided into clusters, each of which can have its own rules, node types, permissions for joining, transaction types that it processes, and still being able to take advantage of the network as a whole. So we use this FBFT consensus. It's divided into 2 different parts. One part is the voting on a cluster level. We also have an arbitrator ring that kind of provides additional layers of security and validation to whatever voting rounds there are. I won't get into much details of that, but I would say that we are very focused and I think very aware about confidentiality, data privacy, not only in terms of the customers, as I mentioned in previous examples, but also in terms of companies, the way they share information across their own security and confidentiality borders. We want to make sure that even competitors can work with each other in some way or form over the DGT network. So in addition to our consensus model, we have implemented those additional protocols. We've implemented zero knowledge proof. We've implemented the secure multi-party computation. We've implemented some advanced cryptography types, including quantum resistance, which I think is important to do, especially now. There's a big problem coming to the blockchain companies in 2029, 2030. It is predicted when quantum computers will be powerful enough to break the cryptography really simply. And if you're Ethereum or if you're a company that hasn't implemented it yet, you essentially have to do a hard fork or reset or change your entire cryptography type, which is a problem for them, but we've implemented it since the beginning. I know I'm kind of up-talking our company a lot, and there are still problems out there that we haven't solved, but we are trying to be mindful of a lot of these concerns up front as we are growing and developing. One of those concerns is also just the degree of decentralization. So despite the fact that we ourselves have our own wallet in development, our own front-end applications in development, we are excited to partner with Unido, for instance, in terms of the capabilities that you guys have for multi-signatures, for working with enterprises. I think that adds a lot to our suite of products and capabilities as well.
I think that's what's really unique about Unido as well as the multi-party computation that is built into the wallet. Michael, do you want to talk a little bit about how that process works for the Unido wallet?
I'm going to talk a lot simpler than Alex did because I like simple things. And it's a pretty simple thing, MPC, right? You take the private key, you chop it up, and you hand out parts of the private key, and it becomes a mathematical exercise to reconstitute the key again. You need sufficient fragments. So the beauty, of course, is it is a distributed key. You hack one device, you haven't won anything until you win a threshold of the keys. These sorts of things play well with the combination. I think Alex touched on it. Using a business class, and I'm going to call his blockchain a blockchain because it's synonymous with what we always talk about. And then working, you can't have one point of failure, right? It's no good having a fantastically engineered layer one chain and then a weak wallet, and the private key gets exposed there. That just moves the penetration point. You need end to end. And that's where it makes a lot of sense to combine these sorts of products where the private key, which in of itself is just a chain of characters together and can do a lot of damage if it's stolen or misplaced. So you need to manage that with the same degree of care that the actual layer one protocol works. So, taking into the account, and I suppose this is why we came up with Unido in the first place, that we can't take control of how secure the protocols are, but we can take control of the custody of the private key. That's what we specialise in, and of course, Alex has hinted at it. We've got ongoing talks about putting the two technologies together, especially when it comes to enterprise and their corporate governance needs. It's pretty necessary, so it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, exactly. You don't want to just move the penetration point, as you said, to another level. If you want to be secure, if you want to serve the enterprise market, you've got to make sure that both the back-end processing and the front-end access are equally secure in every way.
And Michael, do you see like Unido being able to cater to other chains such as DGT in time if the chain is very successful and Unido is able to accommodate multiple chains such as DGT?
Yep. So the technology is blockchain agnostic. At the end of the day, most chains, and we can adapt how we modularize and put them in, essentially hand us off a private key, and how it's put back into the chain when it's transacting is a particular routine depending on the protocol. But at the end of the day, what we're protecting is a serial line of characters, and we have the technology to shard those up. So without having seen the protocol paper, and as Alex suggested, we have had our guys on our end have a think about how we would do this. But the answer is yes. Blockchains typically all operate fundamentally the same. The routines are different, but at the end of the day, you require the private key to operate the wallet. Alex's chain is no different in that regard. The actual procedural sequences and everything we can accommodate for. We modulise how we put in new chains, so it's reasonably quick. And we just did Polygon and Solana. It's a fast process now because the guys are attuned to how to get these things together. So we move with the business when they're ready to accommodate and get it on board. Then it's a simple matter of modularising, checking their docs and figuring out how we're going to smash the key up and the sequence to send it back together again. So no doubts there.
Now, Alex, you guys, DGT has not released a native token yet, but I think you're planning on releasing one next year. Is that right?
Yeah, we're planning to release one in Q1 of 2023. It's called the Decentralized Economy Coin, at least that's what we're planning to call it. And we really want to do it right when we do release it, which is why we waited for us to get some enterprise use cases to launch our mainnet and then release it on the first decentralized and then centralized exchanges a little bit later. We want to make sure that the coin does appreciate in value with every additional use case that is brought onto the platform, whether it's technology or a new client or a new use case as a whole, maybe a new industry that opens up. And we are planning to release it first as a kind of limited sale for accredited investors, and then hopefully it will be traded on exchanges. We have uploaded a roadmap to our website that contains some of those strategic points as well. So for people that are listening that are interested in what DGT does, there are many ways to engage with us. If you're an enterprise, of course, we have our own services and products, but even if you're an individual that believes in Web3, that believes in this future, you can become a part of it and contribute to it through us and our coin.
Really exciting stuff. That's really awesome, and best of luck when that launches. That's very exciting.
Thank you.
Do you see a need for DGT to ever lean into layer 2 solutions to scale up, or is it scalable as is?
Well, first of all, a lot of talk about layer 2 solution has been kind of diluted. So some people define layer 2 as indeed the protocols that add to scalability, to speed, to security, to all those basic processing parameters. Others see layer 2s as adding some additional business capabilities. So depending on who you talk to, we're defined differently. In terms of the first, we are very scalable. We have the basics down. Eventually, when we do reach our maximum capacity of nodes, we will reach 50K transactions per second, which comes with an asterisk because it depends on what kind of transactions we're talking about, but as a basic measure, we will be there, and it'll be highly secure. But on the same side, we do have our own additional business capabilities that we've tried to build on the network. We have the embedded tokenization that I mentioned without smart contracts. We do support smart contracts as well, but not only them, but also variable and programmable transaction types. We do have our own decentralized identity management. We have these notary nodes, as we call them, which are essentially off-chain calculations. They're held by companies, typically law companies or audit firms, that can be right there on the ground and see that, yes, if you're trying to tokenize a real estate asset, that yes, this real estate asset does exist, that it belongs to you, that it's there, that it's worth a certain amount of value, so they add that additional validation. And so we do these things that are essentially layer 2 capabilities, but of course we are a small company. We will be a small company forever in terms of the magnitude of this industry. So we're looking forward to having other businesses join us with their own capabilities, with their own products and services. We are not greedy. We're always open to sharing with our customers and with people who are on our network, because every new business that joins us adds to the technology, to the value offering, and to the ecosystem as a whole.
Do you see interoperability between DGT and other chains?
Yes, I think if we look into the future, maybe 2 years from now, there'll be maybe 5 or 6 top blockchains, and all of those top blockchains that are successful will have some interoperability components, so there's no way around it. If you look at 2021, 88 new layer 1 blockchains opened up. Some of them will fail, some of them will be up there, but if you're an enterprise company looking to decide on where to go, you don't really want to risk it. I mean, if you have a company that you've been building up and you're looking to tokenize, and then you go with a Terra network, and it's January 2022, then that's additional risk that's brought on.
Ouch.
Yes.
Yeah.
So for DGT, we are trying to be interoperable. Of course, because there are different consensus models, different speeds of transaction processing, really there is no way to be completely integrated from network to network. But if you're talking about mirroring tokenization aspects or state reflections or bridges, we are trying to do that. We have that on our roadmap as well. We're starting with Ethereum and Binance as kind of these large ecosystems. But in the future, we do want to be interoperable with Solana, with Avalanche, with Algorand, and with a few other layer 1 companies there. But yeah, it's too early to tell who will be there in 2 or 3 years, who will be the winners of this race. But I do think that interoperability is, of course, a big topic, and that's what I also liked from what Michael said, the fact that Unido does look towards interoperability and being blockchain agnostic, as you said, Michael. I think that's a big component of any success in this industry going forward.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think being agnostic to the blockchain, just going to where the demand is definitely a vital part of the success in building out where this needs to go.
Yeah, exactly. And as Michael said, for example, yeah, Solana dominates gaming. And then if you look at R3 Corda, they dominate the banking industry. And there's some degree of specialization there, but a lot of the functions for emitting tokens, for managing identity, they're very similar. So there's a lot to integrate there no matter what sector comes in and wants to tokenize or build something on the blockchain eventually.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it sounds to me like DGT is going to lend itself a lot to microtransactions or smaller size transactions to sort of alleviate the gas fee debacle that's happening.
Yeah, the gas fee debacle is quite something. I think that's true. We can accommodate any types of transactions, and working with enterprises often requires us to work with slower and heavier transactions. But the speed of our network, the scalability of it does lend itself pretty well for microtransactions. And if you look at such big growing markets as real estate or carbon, there are a lot of companies talking about tokenization and how it fragments whatever asset you're tokenizing, and how this fragmentation is a great way to fundraise or to sell something. But if you say you fragment a building and you can sell it for $100 a piece through these tokens, but processing each transaction costs $30, then of course it's not a really great use case there. So microtransactions, that wouldn't be a microtransaction, but a small transaction or microtransactions is where DGT, I think, would shine the best going forward. Yeah.
That's very cool. Very cool. Well, Michael, is there anything you'd like to add into the discussion here before we wrap up in a bit?
Look, I think Alex has covered the merits of what they're building and why they're building it specifically. Like you said previously, we've seen so many layer 1 blockchains come out. As you know, I also am with the Tokenomic VC, and we get to review those, and to be frank, 90% of them, there's very little differentiation. So the chains that you see that will be effective in the next couple of years will be a much smaller set, in my opinion, than 80 or 90 or 100. It'll be sort of 5 big monster chains. They'll all have to be interoperable, because it doesn't work. Long term, it doesn't work to have some popular things on one chain, some popular things on another chain. How do I get assets across from one chain to another, or do I need to stay loyal to one chain and I can't participate in the other? We know that doesn't work. Then it means if they're not interoperable, you rely on centralized exchanges, which everyone whinges about centralized exchanges for good reasons, and for the fact that they're not decentralized and it's anti-blockchain. So for all those reasons, they're going to have to be interoperable. So I think cooperation between the chains and innovation is what's going to drive it, and what Alex and team have built ticks the boxes. So it's very interesting to hear it from the horse's mouth, what they're doing. But there's a big need for this sort of thing, right? We've been banging on about the enterprise space for quite some time, that it is underserved. And people need to understand selling these things, and we've already talked about it earlier today, selling these things to the enterprise space is a long activity. It's not a matter of convincing one person and away you go like it is on a personal basis. you're convincing sometimes hundreds of people in a huge organisation. This takes time. So the blockchains that are going to service the enterprise industry in years to come have a long game to play. They're not going to have paying clients next year. You know, they may onboard a few, and it's a trial beta basis, and it's a slow process. But it is a slow process worth undertaking, because the ones that get it right, you know, the sky's the limit. So, you know, well done to Alex and the team. They're definitely on the right path.
Thanks so much, Michael. And I'm glad you mentioned centralized exchanges, because a lot of people don't even realize how anti-blockchain those are, how much privacy or confidentiality they lose by even opening an account and passing a KYC procedure with those centralized exchanges. So we're definitely
That's the same as the bank, isn't it?
a new alternative.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm excited to have this talk, and that we are being so many things.
Yeah, look, it's a really cool take on what's needed for enterprise, instead of just saying it's an enterprise class chain and it's another EVM. You know, but there's nothing enterprise about that apart from putting a sticker on it. So it's good to see you guys actually solving the enterprise.
That's not important.
Well, you guys, thank you so much for sitting down with us. Alex, thank you for joining us on an episode of Unido Talks, and Michael, as always, thank you. Alex,
Always
is there
a pleasure.
anything that you want to leave our listeners with of what to look forward to down the road, or what's next for DGT before we let you go?
I think Web3 is coming, and it's coming fast. It's a big future. DGT is right in the beginning of it. There are many other exciting projects out there as well. So for people who are not familiar with it, I recommend trying to explore, learn more about it. It will definitely be a part of your world coming soon. And for people that are familiar with it, take a look at DGT. I think you'll find us quite interesting, as well as Unido. We are quite similar in terms of the problems we're trying to address, just on different ends of the spectrum. And yeah, thank you so much for having me on this podcast. It's been a pleasure, guys. It was very nice. Thank you.
Well,
Thanks
thank you
for
guys
joining
for
us.
joining us, and to our listeners, if you want to learn more about DGT or Alex or Michael or Unido, just go down to the description below and you can learn all you need there. Thank you guys.